Welcome, you're watching Primetime. I'm Tamanna Inamdar.
And my name is Ayush Alawali. Let's have a look at today's headlines. Urjit Patel hits back at RBI's critics, says no regulator can prevent all frauds, adds that the RBI has limited regulatory powers over PSU banks.
The government gets the finance bill passed without any discussions by voice vote. Opposition cries foul.
It's a setback for the BJP. The Samajwadi Party beats the ruling party in Gorakhpur and Phulpur Lok Sabha constituencies. Rashtriya Janata Dal wins 2 of the 3 constituencies in Bihar.
Jindal Steel and Power is looking to raise up to $200 million via QIP. That's a Bloomberg Quint exclusive.
And banks approached the RBI seeking an exemption from classifying accounts which were under the SDR scheme as non-performing assets. All right, the big news break of the day right up on top. RBI Governor Urjit Patel has broken his silence on the PNB fraud. Speaking at the Gujarat National Law University or GNLU, Patel said that incidents like the PNB fraud are akin to looting the country's future by few businessmen. He also said that it was not possible for the regulator to detect all the frauds in the system. Vishwanath Nair joins us now. Vishwanath, what are your key observations from Patel's speech?
Well, to be sure, it's not just about the PNB fraud, it's also a broad commentary on how the regulator regulates the banking system in India. There were questions raised that the RBI wasn't doing its job properly. So what he has done is set the record straight. He's saying that the Banking Regulations Act, which essentially gives the RBI the power to regulate banking entities, it clearly distinguishes how the RBI can regulate a public sector bank and a private sector bank. He's saying while they have a lot more powers compared in the private sector banking space, they can, move senior management. They can take up much more decisions in how the bank is functioning. In the public sector banking space, that thing is sort of divided, the ability to regulate. So in his speech, he's pointed out that this is a legislative reality, that in the law it exists that the regulation of a state-owned bank will be split between the finance ministry and the RBI, which ensures that the RBI's ability to regulate these banks sort of comes down. He's also pointed out as part of his speech is that while there has been this propensity for people to simply just blame the RBI for not doing its job, it is important to notice that it is not possible for any regulator, any financial regulator in the world, to actually cut out every single fraud that may happen. It is not just because they exist. It's not possible that they can do that. What they can instead do is reduce the number of frauds that may happen. They can also reduce the number of people who are impacted by those frauds. But by no means are they capable of completely erasing frauds from the system. He also pointed out that just because the RBI, has been made this villain in this scheme of things, it's not completely removed from reality. It says he says that the RBI does feel anger, hurt, and pain whenever something like this happens in the state-owned banking space. He says that this is akin to looting, as you pointed out earlier, Ayush. It's akin to looting of the country's future by some of these businessmen who are in cahoots with certain lenders. So, those are pretty strong points coming out of the RBI governor. Lastly, he's also pointed out that he's equating this whole scheme of things of how the RBI is regulating public sector banks and NPA regulation to the Samudra Manthan, and he's saying that till the point in time that we complete this whole process and whatever issues may arise out of it, the RBI is ready to take all those brickbats till the point in time that we reach stability. Okay. And unless that has been achieved, the public sector banking space cannot be fixed in that sense.
That was the most standout quote, I think. That
yes,
the RBI will absorb that.
Yeah, he's saying the RBI is ready to become the Neelkant. Yeah, so
very strong words.
Pretty strong words, pretty poetic.
Okay. To talk more about the implications of Governor Patel's speech, We have joining us now former Deputy Governors of RBI, K.C. Chakravarti and Usha Thorat. I'm also joined by former Economic Affairs Secretary R. Gopalan. Welcome all and thank you for speaking with us on Bloomberg Quint. Ms. Thorat, I'm going to pose the first question to you. What do you make of the basis of Urjit Patel's argument, saying that we do not have enough regulatory powers over public sector banks to ensure that those who are defrauding the system are punished enough?
Hello, whom are you asking first?
Ms. Thorat, the question is for you.
Okay, yeah, sorry. No, I think it's an excellent speech by the governor and I really congratulate him for this. It's extremely frank, it's extremely objective, and it has laid bare the entire fact that banking regulatory powers in India are not ownership neutral, and the kind of powers, regulatory and supervisory powers that RBI can exercise over the private sector banks is not applicable to the public sector banks. And he has given in detail the various powers which one could exercise to bring about the necessary regulation and supervision of the private sector banks, which is not applicable in the case of public sector banks. And I think this is a time for really soul searching. And if what Governor Patel has very clearly and eloquently laid out, if these are addressed, I think the kind of mechanisms that can induce a discipline against frauds could certainly be put in place and strengthened. And I think it's an extremely welcome speech, and I really congratulate it.
Ma'am, this is Vishwanath joining in for this conversation. Some critics and who I've spoken to earlier before this program have said that this is probably trying to absolve the RBI from any of these fraudulent instances. As such, at the end of this whole thing, the RBI is the regulator and the banks are the regulated entity. So whatever happens, anything wrong that happens with banks, it is the RBI's responsibility then. So do you think that he's trying to probably absolve himself of any of the blame that may arise out of this?
I think that we have to say that this there have been far too regular. He says that there have been such frauds and related irregularities in the banking sector. Now, if you look at the banking history over the last, say, 15, 20 years, you'll find that there have been a number of banks in the private sector where there were problems and they were addressed. They were addressed by the Reserve Bank. I mean, we can think of a number of banks which were there in the late part of the 90s and early part of 2000s, which just went out of existence, mainly because of the fact that there were certain weaknesses and inadequacies in their way of functioning. What they were doing is not in the interest of depositors, and over a period, those banks have just gone out of existence. Either they were merged or whatever. But the point is that they are no longer there. So RBI took powers, all the powers that he has mentioned, removing directors, removing the management, superseding of a bank's board, providing for the removal of chairman and managing director, forcing a merger. All these powers have been used. And we can actually list the cases where all these powers have been used, triggering a liquidation. The duality of the managing director and the chairman. These have been very important powers which RBI has used in the case of private sector banks. It could not use in the case of public sector banks because it is under a different act. The ownership and management is defined differently. And I think it is really important that this particular issue has been highlighted. One can say easily that, RBI is just trying to deflect the issue and take away the responsibility. I don't think anybody is doing that. I think it's very clearly stated that, the kind of issues, it is a matter of internal control, but the whole governance system is what is actually being described in this speech. Why is the governance what it is what is being laid bare in this speech of the governor.
I'm very keen to get in a comment from K.C. Chakravarti. Mr. Chakravarti, especially because you've been on both sides of this situation. You're former RBI Deputy Governor, you've been Chairman and MD of Punjab National Bank, as well as Indian Bank. How do you see the points that Governor Patel is trying to put across today?
You see, whatever governor is saying, this is perfectly correct. There is absolutely no doubt that these are the facts. Only thing, This should have been told much earlier by everybody from Reserve Bank. In fact, in 2013, I have said our regulation is not ownership neutral. But when you say that, that has to be raised. Second thing is that our ownership has many other defects. First thing, it is not neither rule-based nor principle-based. It is discretion-based. Our regulation is not proportionate because we don't have a risk management framework in the bank. So all this has to be tackled. But what governor is saying, it is 100% correct that if the regulation is not ownership neutral, in fact, it is not even neutral over time or over the space, then we will face problem. And when we will face problem, we will be not able to solve. And second part, what he's saying, when we are discussing this fraud, we must say that more problem of the banks is the quantum of NPS. You see, if you see the total quantum of NPS, this may be 10 trillion, this may be 12 trillion, this may be 14 trillion. Against that, 33,000 crore is nothing. So our focus should not be moved towards that. We have the more bigger problem for the banks is the overall quantum of NPA, and that needs to be tackled on urgent basis. The amount of fraud, yes, in a bank which has happened, in a branch which has happened, which is dangerous. But then the system will not collapse because of that. But unless we are able to solve the NPA problem, in my view, the total NPA in the system is about 20 trillion. And these need to be addressed. And this needs to be addressed very fast. Today, there are many banks whose net NPAs are their net worth is not even 50% of their net NPAs. Now, we have the problem. And I think he is focusing on that area also. It is a very great speech, and I join Madam Thurat that yes, this is an excellent speech by the governor, and he has put forward these issues. Now, what are the consequences? That is different. Look, you can say that I want to get out of my problem. But then if I am not able to solve the problem, I have certain handicaps and deficiencies, I must raise that issue. There is nothing wrong in that.
Right, Mr. Chakravarti. I'd like to bring in a former Economic Affairs Secretary, R. Gopalan, as well. Mr. Gopalan, thanks for joining us on Bloomberg. When it comes to some of these things that Governor Patel said, and especially all the talk about the RBI having limited authority over state-run banks, I'd like to get your views on it, especially if you see this as some sort of a cry for help, considering he's mentioned the dual regulation aspect as well.
Okay, on the dual regulation which the governor has spoken of, is very correct, absolutely correct. But you must look at these things in the context of what we are talking about, the frauds in the bank. The system is not functioning in the bank. Audit has not thrown up these kind of issues that have come about. These have, I don't know how much you can totally rely them on the inadequate powers under various Banking Regulation Act and RBI. That is something we need to separately look at. I strongly feel that what Governor has said about powers, ownership neutrality as well as regulation is concerned, I totally agree with him. They are required to be done. We have to start a debate on it and get it forward as we go along. But the question of fraud relates to inspections, regulations, and audit. So, obviously, RBI with 120,000 branches, I don't expect them to do a very focused branch-by-branch inspection and audit. It's not possible for them. Obviously, they lay out certain rules, certain regulations, and they want people to implement. And if implementation by the people are not okay, then there is a problem. So, my belief is that, in this case, the governor is correct in the sense that, more powers are to be given. In fact, close to the PJ Nayak report where they wanted that the banks to be public sector banks to be converted into companies, so that they will come under the Banking Regulation Act. We strongly believe it should be done. But the issue under CAN at this point in time is slightly different. This is what I wanted to differentiate.
Right. Mr. Gopalan, Vishwanath here. Just wanted to, put this question out. Now, in the past, Arun Jaitley has come out and said publicly that the regulators probably weren't doing their job right. Now we have the RBI governor coming back in some form. It is a response to that statement. Do you think that it's fair that the government and the RBI, these two large, very, very important institutions for the country, are publicly airing whatever differences they may have in opinion and publicly stating, these issues that they have? Do you think that it's good for the country? Because, this kind of debate, it seems a little off, that's all.
I think people in responsible positions, I believe that these things should not be aired in public. There is scope for discussion, very frank discussion across the table. You can discuss any point under any of the issues which affect the banking sector. You can discuss them. But to my mind, airing them public, I don't think I won't look at it with happiness.
Well, the governor has made some key points, and I just want to read out one section from his speech where he says the government has not so far been interested in fundamentally modifying the ownership structure. Mr. Chakravarti, is it, in a sense, a clear indictment of how the government has been holding on to public sector banks? Because he also explains later on in his speech that the rationale behind nationalization was to make sure that lending was directed to certain sections of the economy. And perhaps that's why the government is not too happy to let go.
You see, look, lending is the principal function of the banks. If you say the purpose of nationalization was to lend to the poor, that purpose is not served. In fact, you see, last 30 years we have listened that public sector banks' NPA problem is because of only directed lending. But the problem is today, now everybody is agreeing that the problem of banks' NPA is not because of lending to the smaller people. It is lending to the bigger people. And if you see the total amount of lending which has been made to the bigger people, it is much higher. So where is the purpose of objective of nationalization has been served? Because major part of resources has gone to the more influential and privileged part of people, and that is wasted. That has all become NPA. Bank's problem is because of that.
Right, Mr. Chakrabarti, Vishwanath here. I just wanted to pose the same question I asked Mr. Gopalan earlier. Is it fair that the RBI governor and the finance minister come out publicly and state whatever differences they may have with each other? Don't you think that such important officials of the Indian economy could probably talk to each other, in private?
Look, I am very clear in that my views altogether. Everything should be discussed. We must be transparent. There is nothing wrong if we are discussing the issue in public, because this is an issue. Every day, everybody is discussing, media is discussing, TV channel is discussing, I is discussing, you are discussing. Why it cannot be discussed? Look, the issue is that it is the issue of perception. So I will be always there. We must discuss everything in the open in a democratic system. There is nothing wrong in that. So long as purpose of discussion is to find out the problem, solve the problem. If it is there, I have absolutely no problem in that.
Absolutely,
if the perception is different, let us debate that issue. Because if that perception remains, unless it is debated in open, you will be never able to solve those issues.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a key point, and perhaps that is what Governor Patel was trying to do, to put, this grievance out in the public domain so as to push a conversation around it. And in that context, Mr. Gopalan, is it now key that the government of the day take on board these suggestions from the RBI governor? He is saying very clearly that we need to look at this as an opportunity, this latest PNB case as an opportunity to rework the entire system.
Well, more solutions in the economy have come about after we have got into great problems. So this can be used as a peg to create necessary reforms, which we are looking at. Once again, I would rather feel that these issues are debated and these issues are taken forward in the best interest of the public. I totally concede the point that regulation must be ownership neutral. There's absolutely no doubt about it. It has got to be same for everybody. But within that, whatever shades in which this can be operated, we can look at it. But frankly speaking, it's time that the government holding in public sector banks comes down below 50, and RBI has a free hand in regulating. But obviously, this has got to be brought about with so much of consensus in debate and thinking and talking. And it is time we take it forward with all the force which we can command at this point in time.
Thank you so much, R. Gopalan, KC Chakravarti and Usha Thorat for speaking with us on that big story. We will have to take a little break right now, but we're coming right back with the first debate on Primetime Debate. We're talking about the finance bill, which was passed today in about 25 minutes with a voice vote. The opposition is crying foul, saying that this is not how parliamentary democracy should work. More on that when we come back. A.K. Bhattacharya and K.C. Tyagi will join us.